Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're doing well and your experience is filled with bliss. And if it's not, eat a cookie. That usually works for me. Today, I have a question for you. How long have you been walking this spiritual path? Take a moment and think about something. Has it brought you peace? Or has it just filled your head with so much spiritual jargon that you're now drowning in awareness and existential confusion? Maybe you've reached a point where the knowledge feels more like a burden than a blessing. I get it. I've been there. You start out looking for truth, and suddenly you're knee-deep in depression, cut off from your friends and your family, wandering through a long, dark hallway of isolation, thinking, damn, I must have missed something along the way. Have you ever hit that awakening state? That emptiness that everyone talks about like it's the Holy Grail, but now you're just there? You're stuck there, wondering what on earth is supposed to fill it? Have you become that angry seeker? The one who's constantly comparing your journey to the blissed out tales of spiritual teachers asking, hey, where's my unconditional love, bro? Yeah, I've been there too. There was a time when free spirituality made me feel more disconnected than ever. Worse than even my time as a Christian, and let me tell you, that one was tricky to get through by itself. But much like the Christian scene, I started noticing that some folks in the spiritual community, people who had been on a path for years, were actually kind of, miserable. And that made me pause. I started to ask myself, why are so many seekers falling into this trap? Why are we always chasing something that just seems so far out of reach? Desperately trying to dissolve fear and separation and the false stories that we've clung on to for so long. And I started to notice that when we fall into this trap, what do? We buy more books. We watch more videos, we do more meditating, we practice more mantras, or we try to consume as much spiritual woo-woo than even before, looking for that missing piece of the puzzle. Eventually, something clicked. I realized that the spiritual community, beautiful as it can be, often puts an overwhelming emphasis on self, on self-love, self-realization, self-this, self-that. And when you internalize that the wrong way, it can start to feel incredibly lonely. Like you're supposed to fix everything about yourself. Like it's you against the universe, against the life experience. But my friends, that's a huge misunderstanding. And it could easily create more trouble for you than what you started off with. Let me be clear. Yes, the self is said to be everything. God, the universe, consciousness, it's all pointing to the same thing. And yes, that self is what we're all trying to realize. But you have to remember one thing. The self isn't you. Not in the personal way we like to think about it. It's not a new identity to hold on to. It's not your new shiny spiritual badge of honor. It's not something you're supposed to walk around proud of or think of yourself as being higher than others who haven't figured it out yet. It's just a label. That's all it is. Understand that. The truth is, this isn't about becoming a new version of yourself. It's about realizing that there was never a you to begin with. We try to let go of the ego only to chase after a bigger, more enlightened ego, and that's where we get stuck. Some of us will start thinking that we know more than others or that we're more spiritually involved than the next guy. But the truth is that it isn't so. It's just a super improved ego set. That's all it is. Because what you really are isn't personal. It's not something you can claim. It's not yours. No, instead, it's all that there is. And once you see that, you'll understand why you can't find this so-called true self. It's not hiding from you. It's not just a thing that belongs to a separate you. Because, again, there is no separate you. Now, I know this can kind of sound heavy, but actually, it's the most freeing realization you can have. Because what you are, this pure, ever-present, infinite something, is not bound by suffering, not limited by fear, and certainly not confined to one small identity. It's peace. It's love. It's what every teacher has been trying to point us towards for centuries. But there is a catch. You have to completely surrender. You have to give it all up. Your desires, your fears, your brilliant spiritual knowledge. Yes, even that. Surrender it all. Hand it over to the experience, source, to the universe, God, whatever name you're most comfortable with. And as you do that, something amazing happens. This you begins to dissolve. You start to disappear. Not in a scary way, but in the most beautiful, liberating way possible. You become a vessel. God, the universe, consciousness, again, whatever you want to call it, begins to live through you. And that's what we mean when we say, I am God, or I am the universe. It's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's just the realization that once everything personal falls away, all that is left is divine experience. Think about it for a second. If God, or the infinite consciousness, is truly everything, where could a separate you exist? There is no independent you apart from this oneness. Only God, the universe, or source exists. So surrender the idea of who you think you are, who you've been programmed and conditioned to believe that you are. Release your personal identity, your ego, and let yourself dissolve into the infinite. This is where true fulfillment begins, where the veil of separation lifts, revealing that you are already whole, already everything that you've been seeking. Now, this doesn't mean that the spiritual journey that you took was unnecessary. Paradoxically, you need to embark on this path of seeking to realize you were never separate from the source to begin with. It might feel like a cosmic riddle or even a trick, but the journey itself is what leads you to this truth. Without walking this path, you might not have uncovered the deeper reality that a higher intelligence, perhaps even a wiser aspect of yourself, orchestrated this experience for your awakening. Life is a trip, homies, and sometimes we set ourselves up for these challenges, knowing they're the gateway to rediscovering the bliss and unity that's always been within us. Maybe your higher self has been trying to tell you something all along, right? Once you see this, you'll see that this path to unconditional love, it's not as hard to get to as you thought it was. It's not by clinging to emptiness like it's your final destination or quote-unquote nirvana, but by letting that emptiness be filled up again by the source itself. Go back to the well, drink deeply, surrender every idea, every label, every last shred of personal self until nothing remains but presence, love, and your own inner truth. And when you do that, something extraordinary happens. The universe starts to move through you. There's no longer a you trying to do life. There's just life living itself through the form of you. This is precisely what Jesus was preaching about. His life as we know it, it was a testament to complete surrender. Dedicating himself entirely to the infinite. By letting go of his personal identity, Jesus transcended the individual self. In his direct experience, there was no separate Jesus anymore. Only God, only Source, fully expressed through the vessel that we called Jesus. That same transformation is possible for you. By surrendering your sense of self, you can allow the infinite to live through you, just as it did through him. Because, as my brother Jesus said, greater things than I you shall do. Now listen, you don't have to do this alone. You're not meant to. If you've been feeling like the lone spiritual warrior battling through the dark night with nothing but a meditation app and a bookshelf full of Eckhart Tolle, let me stop you right there. Breathe. You can surrender right now. Focus on your breath. Focus on your inhale through your nose and your exhale through your mouth. You can hand it all over. The universe is waiting for you to come home. Your higher self is waiting for you to enjoy the experience of just being yourself. Now, when I use the word yourself, you have to remember they're just labels. Don't read too much into what I say or how I say it, but the message that is behind it. Drop your spiritual ego and remove everything from yourself, everything that you thought you knew or thought you have gained on this walk, and give it back to source. Drop it like a sack of potatoes and just surrender. My friends, I give you this quote that helped me realize that I was the one making my own misery while on my spiritual walk, and it helped me change my direction. He who knows that he knows not is healthy. He who thinks he knows, but knows not, is sick. Your inner peace lies in embracing not knowing. Assuming you have all the answers is a form of ignorance. Begin by recognizing your own limitations and illusions. Only then can you start the journey toward genuine understanding and clarity. Because this is where the experience begins. This is where unconditional love starts to flow. The body isn't yours. The thoughts aren't yours. None of it is yours. Because there's no separate someone to own it. So just give it back. Give it all back to source, God, conscious, whatever you want to call it. Because once you give it back to source, you start to realize that all this other stuff, it's just noise. That's all it is. All those books, all these videos, including my own, it's all just noise. Stop seeking. Stop trying to figure it all out. You don't need any more knowledge. You don't need a better technique. You don't even need to be quote unquote spiritual. You just need to surrender your past, your future, your mind, your labels, your story. Surrender the idea of who you think you are and just be. Live for the experience, not for the ego, not for the labels, not for the fame, not for the acknowledgement of others. There are no others. No, there is just everything. Be everything, and at the same time, understand nothing. Remember, you're not alone. You never were. You're not the wave, you're the ocean. Now let it flow. I thank you for being here. If this message resonated with you, please like it, subscribe, and share with someone who you think it may help. I love you all. Walk in light.